Hello, good to see you. My name is Taeyun, and today I'm going to talk about preparing for a job application as an educator. I want to focus on a type of document that is required by, I would say, almost all types of teaching positions at university level. And that is the statement of purpose as an educator, or teaching statement. So this document gives you a chance to talk about your teaching philosophy, how you approach your job as a profession, and also how you think about yourself in the context of the university and academia at large. So I have a few versions of these statements that I've created and submitted over the last few years. My relationship to academia and teaching and also students have changed dramatically in the last 5 years. So I see things very differently. And also my purpose of applying for jobs have changed as well. So it's always this constant reworking of the document and oftentimes using the material that I have already created, but in different order, different tone, different word choices, and sometimes geared specifically for the position that I'm applying to. I personally don't find this document very difficult because I think it's just a chance to be really honest about why you want to teach and a chance to talk about your commitment to students and the school. I don't think the applicant needs to tell something that is more than what they have already done or planning to do. I think it's very straightforward. This document is oftentimes requested in tandem with two other types of documents. One, which is the cover letter, which is a way to address the specific committee that will be reviewing your application, that will talk about why you're interested in this particular school. So that's a cover letter, usually 1 or 2 pages, and the statement on diversity, equity, and inclusion, or in short, DEI statement. So these 3 things are almost always requested from all universities these days in the US. I think it's different in other countries. And in thinking about the teaching statement, you want to engage with some of the ideas that are covered in the cover letter and also the DEI statement. And you also want to focus in the teaching philosophy and practice in this document. So always thinking about this triangulation of the document, cover letter, diversity, and teaching. And hopefully they're actually in conversation with one another and complement each other and give the committee a chance to look into you as an educator, practitioner, and a human being. So to get started, I'm going to first review the teaching statement that I have already created and submitted, a few versions of those. And I'm going to see what I can salvage from them. And I'm going to leave some questions to ask myself to elaborate on this updated teaching statement. And these statements are created in this hypothetical situation of me actually being on the committee, the search committee. And if I'm reading what I have submitted, what kind of questions would I have for this applicant? So let's go. So this is a document that I created last year around this time for a teaching position that I did not get, but let's start to read. I've taught undergrad and graduate level courses on media studies, critical theory of technology, sociology, and art. While some of my classes have focused on technical skills, I also engage with theory of social justice in the curriculum and student activities. I guess this is initially the why I teach section. I teach because classrooms are where art and activism meet. social changes begin. I guess this is a phrase that I've used for a long time, and I really believed in it. I honestly have some questions about this statement these days. I teach because classrooms are where art and activism meets and social change begins. I have questions about this statement because I think we need classrooms to be a safe space for students. And the word activism I meant as a more positive, progressive social movement, but activism could also mean something different in this day and age. So I'm just a little cautious about this envelope term of activism. I teach because the experience of teaching rewards me with the gift of intellectual stimulation. I teach because it's one of the ways to begin a lifelong friendship with diverse practitioners. I'm just noticing my grammar is quite poor here. I teach because it's a way I can have a meaningful, positive impact on others. I teach because knowledge and skills can empower students to become empowered and thoughtful. Yeah, I'm using the word empowered twice in one sentence, and that is not good. I've taught at NIU, Parsons, SFPC, co-organized TIGA Brain, where I co-organized with TIGA Brain Learning to Teach conference at the Processing Foundation. For the last year, I've been working at Yonsei University teaching undergraduate and graduate department. So I go to the next part, which is what I teach. I'm experienced in teaching media studies with a focus on code, networks, and environment. So I use this word media studies because this particular program was media studies. I would use like different words here, like digital arts or whatever. I've organized Introduction to Sound at IBEAM. My teaching specialty is both low-level hardware design, analog and digital circuit, and high-level programming languages. I've taught JavaScript, C++, and Python, electronics, visual sound production at Adobe Suite. So these are just like stuff that I could teach. I have taught these stuff, but looking back, I feel like that is actually not my strength. I think my strength would be much more in the socially engaged practice and participatory design and kind of creative imagination with these tools. So I'll word it differently. I'm especially passionate about teaching coding and tools to those who have limited experience and confidence in math and sciences. This is true. I still believe in this. I've also created educational material for deaf and disabled students, providing coding tutorial in ASL and other assistive programs. So this part about diversity and inclusion should redirect the reader to my DEI statement, which is a separate document. My former students have developed creative and critical practice on poetic computation, software hardware network as a form of literary and aesthetic exploration. So actually here, right before that, I just talked about some of those students that I find memorable as somebody who I've taught and somebody who I think is like a good example of how I see the impact of teaching. I might do that in the new document, but I might actually make that actually separate category, such as student work or student impact. How I teach how to develop intellectual curiosity, how to apply qualitative and quantitative methods in research. I was at such a deep inside the sociology department at this time. How to write coherent and engaging text. How I show the types of academic stewardship, building up responsible research, critically engaging with the material. I empower students to become critical thinkers with practical skills and gentle sense of communication. I help students to see the ways that power manifests as systems of oppression, disintegration, alienation, and how we can put ourselves to good use. I also teach in and outside of academia. This year I organized a series of free workshops in e-waste, recycling, right to repair. So this part about outside of academia is interesting, but I think there might be a way to make that more relevant and kind of important or necessary, because it just seems like it's thrown in at the document at this stage. Oh yeah, I have this letter that I wrote to my students in 2015, almost 10 years ago. I like this letter. I think this is one of the more honest letter that I've created for my students in the past. I think, I don't know if I will include this in the current one, but I think it will be good to mention some of these ideas. So that was the teaching statement from last year. Let's see. So I can share some of the more recent document that I'm working on that I've submitted already to other universities. And it starts with a personal statement about where I'm coming from, why I teach, and some of the decisions that I've made about what studies that I would take on, what kind of school that I decided. And it briefly talks about my position in the diversity, equity, inclusion, and some of the positive and challenging experiences that I've had. I don't want to share this part because it's sensitive, but I do want to note that I connect this document with the diversity statement quite early on. And it goes on to classes that I want to teach, and some of the inspirations that I have for teaching, such as the Black Mountain College. And I actually co-wrote a chapter on a book called Bauhaus Futures with Shannon Mattern about kind of an early weaving education in Bauhaus and Black Mountain College. And then I talk about specific classes that I've taught, and I think I actually want to skip this part. And this particular program was much more industry focused, meaning that it was not only a fine art, but they wanted students and faculties to engage with the corporations and academia at large. So it talks about some of the other things that I can do. And it talks about critical perspective on impact on colonialism and capitalism, surveillance, and attention economy. So I think this might actually been kind of a difficult thing for this particular program to accept, because they are much more industry focused. I knew that writing this, but I actually wanted to be honest about where I want to go, because if I write something that they are gonna like, but it's actually not myself, I'm actually gonna have a hard time even if I get accepted to the position. So it might as well be that being honest in the first place would be good. And in the third part, it talks about community building. Teaching is integral to my creative practice. Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think this statement is a little bit subpar. It's just not that good. I don't exactly know why the document is the way that it is. It is more of a list of things that I've done, list of classes or topics that I've addressed, list of references that I find interesting, but it doesn't actually weave these together. They are just presented as this disparate, independent ideas and thoughts or aspirations. So I think the reason might have been that I actually cover a lot of the teaching philosophy in other documents that I've submitted, such as a diversity document. So maybe I just couldn't find something new to add to the teaching document. So that may be why it is like this. Other possible reason is that I might have tried to over-explain myself about the decisions that I've made or classes that I have taught or been part of, which led to more of like expansive overview of the teaching, but not really a deep, sharp, pointed statement about why I teach and how I teach and what I want to get out of it and what I want students to get out of it. So I actually think my document from a year ago is better. So I'm going to try to see if I could get what I like from each of the documents and put it into the new order, and trying not to list things, but because that could actually be covered in the teaching dossier or the student work or sample curriculum. There are different documents that you could demonstrate what you have done. And I'm going to try to get at very sharp voice, like unique voice that I can have about teaching and being an educator. So the way that I like to do that is actually going back to pen and paper, mapping out some of the thought processes, making record of the processes and also the conceptual framework where these processes and references would live, and coming with distilling these ideas into something very cohesive and simple. So I'm going to try to do that. So I'm first reviewing the guideline from the job that I'm interested in. So oftentimes they would specify what types of documents that they want. And it says teaching statement, and it should explicitly address how your creative practice informs your teaching. So it says explicitly address how your creative practice informs teaching. So that's helpful to know that they want how my research, art, and social practice informs my teaching. So that'll be like creative work is here, going into teaching, or it could also be like my creative practice is like that and my teaching is at the center. And then it says, making reference to specific work and research. Good. I mean, I think these two models are interesting on their own. I don't think they are very different. In my view, there are times that you need to teach students in more practical, pragmatic, and efficient manner. And I actually believe that not all teaching needs to be related to creative practice. I think there are ways of being a good teacher and helping students without having to involve your creative practice into it. However, especially in the arts and creative field, I think what you can bring as an educator to the classroom is so much about your experiences in the arts and culture or activism. So students will be very glad to learn from that. It does not specify the length. So I think probably 2-3 pages seems good. And they actually give you another category for student work or example projects. So some of the details about these specific works could be handled over there. So this document would be in like 3 parts, I would say. So let's say this is the artist and then the creative work. And let's say this is the community of practice or academic community. And that could be the colleagues that you have at your current job or previous jobs, or it could also be like people you don't know personally, but have definitely shaped how you think about your work. And I think the student could be part of that as well. And the last part would be how students and the people that you meet through the work could actually support you and inspire you, and you become actually small. So you start with you, this is the creative part, and then actually it becomes smaller. And this is an interesting structure. So this is where you could talk about inspirations, references. This would be like practical teaching. And then this would be how art, community, and teaching coexist. This would be like long-term impact. And I think saying that teaching and classrooms could actually hold multiple views, diversity of practices, and how it's actually not about me, should not be about the teacher. It's a service work. Okay, so I think that's a pretty good plan. I'm going to structure my document in this order. I'm going to see if I could start almost from a blank slate, just to have more freedom, and build on top of that with the existing materials. So, inspirations. Practical teaching and practical teaching, how so this will be nuts and bolts. I guess yeah, there was the last part, which was so yeah, that would be really good. I think that would actually give you a chance to connect this document to the diversity document. And I like this structure. I like how this is a pretty rigid form that allows me to bring in some of the personal experiences, and also it separates my practical philosophy of teaching to more of the artistic and creative aspects of teaching. And I like how this document would become a bridge for the diversity document. So let's see. I mean, something that I've been thinking about recently a lot is questioning the common conception of education as something positive. In the context of the boarding schools, the indigenous people or the young children were displaced from their tribe, their community, and put into school to, you know, assimilate to the American order. And that part of the history of education as tool of indigenous removal and erasure of their ethnic, cultural, creative identities is something that I didn't really know until recently. I mean, I knew it, I read about it, but I didn't actually know what that impact really means. I think living in Colorado definitely have shaped my thinking about that. So I think just recognizing that education is both the positive and the negative impact, or it could have that. Therefore, we need to have education towards the positive direction, because it's possible to spin the same system to oppress people. Yeah, the word that I was looking for was a pharmacon. So I was actually looking into my old email with some students in discussing this piece by Michael Pollan and Catherine May about opioid crisis, like a blessing and a curse. It is a bit of a strong word, but I think I want to use it because I actually believe in it. Indian boarding schools, integration, simulation, educational systems as simulation. So this is why we need to take in further steps, which I follow. I think it's also good to talk about my experience in academia and outside of academia, and more of a traditional and unconventional environment, which I have taught in, and to say that there are actually a lot of similarities in both, and it's not necessarily a clear divide between the two, because oftentimes the traditional academia aspire to have more experimental approach, like an alternative school or artist-run schools. And artist-run school want to have the institutional structure and some of the grounding infrastructure that the establishments have. So I'll get to that.